So one of the biggest, most well-known kind of hunting, I guess, from the medieval period is the grand hunt. So this is sort of the nobility gathering together, going in and off to go and hunt deer. So this is sort of one of the biggest things that you see in all the medieval manuscripts that survive from the time. There was one specifically famous one by a gentleman called Gaston Phoebus. So he was a Frenchman who basically literally wrote the book on hunting. He was an obsessive hunter. He loved the hunt, and he wrote a long treatise, a long book on all the different things you have to do for a successful hunt, and all different kinds of animals that you would be looking at, and different kinds of illumination, so pictures of all the equipment that you need and methods that you need to do it. But he spent a long time focusing on the royal hunt. So this was sort of something that really took his interest, and he was really passionate about. And as I say, it's one of the most sort of commonly referred to things, going into the royal forest and hunting deer. But it's not just the case of getting all of your noble mates together, jumping on the back of the horse and belting into the woods looking for deer. There was a huge panoply of preparation around it. It was a massive undertaking. And it wasn't really about the meat, it was about the whole social aspect of it. So if you were nobility in medieval England and you had access to the royal woods, the royal forests, you could set a hunt. So you could invite other members of your household, other members, alliances, other important people of the period. But before you started, before you put a foot in the stirrup to mount your horse, there's a huge preparation that was done by your masters of hunt. So these were gentlemen who were professionally employed in the household to look after the hounds, to look after the woodland, to prepare for these hunts. And they would do a huge amount of work. So there's accounts of people who would enclose vast areas of woodland. They would dig deep trenches and erect fences. And they would chase the deer so that they leapt over the fence into this ringed enclosure. But to be able to get out, they had to drop down the ditch, and then the deer could not jump over the fences anymore. So they would do this to try and concentrate the deer into effectively a deer park, bring them closer so that there's more deer in the area where the hunt is going to take place. As well as that, days before the hunt master would be going out with his gentlemen, with his men who were trained and know the land, and they would start assessing. They would look for the kind of deer that were around. They would look for tracks. So deer have trails that they would go through the trees to water points or to places they would sleep, and these hunters will be looking for these so they can scout them out, so they can tell their nobility where to expect the deer to come from. They will be looking for trail, so they would be looking for droppings from the deer. They would assess them, so how dry the droppings are, how long ago the deer was there, what sort of smell the droppings have, would know a little bit about the health of the deer. So they want to be hunting prime, healthy, big deer. It's nothing to brag about if you end up coming home from your hunt with this tiny little doe or a small little deer. You want to have the big grand stag with the huge antlers. So your hunters are going to be going ahead of this to make sure that you're looking for the right kind of deer. Now, on the day of the hunt, the gentlemen would assemble and they would be prepared beforehand. They would probably have a breakfast or a feast in the woods. So all of this equipment would be brought out, food would be laid on, ladies of the court would come and basically wish their men off and wish them good luck on the hunt, and the hunt would go throughout the whole day. And there was kind of, broadly speaking, two kinds of hunt. So there was one that was called the par force. This was hunting by force. So this would be where the hunt master would identify the quarry, the prey. So they would, a couple of days before, find a particularly good stag, a particularly good hart, a deer to be chasing, and they would mark the route of it. So they would be looking for the route it would commonly take. Then on the day of the hunt, several teams with all sorts of dogs would be with them. So we'll go into the dogs in another talk, but the dogs would be there to chase the deer on. So the gentlemen, the nobility on horseback, they would be chasing down the deer along the trail that the hunters have identified and marked, and they would be chasing the deer down. And then as the deer started to move and try and escape, the other dog teams would be controlling its movements and hounding it, literally hounding it with their hounds to keep the deer on track as these gentlemen would keep chasing it down. And as they go, the deer would get more and more exhausted. The dog teams would be replaced by other dog teams working in concert with each other, working with these horns. So they would be giving signals, blowing 2 or 3 times, say the deer has gone left, the deer has stopped, it's gone to ground, we've lost the trail, can you bring in another dog team, it's gone to the right. All of these signals blown by the huntsmen on their horns to tell the other teams where the deer is going. And all that time the nobility on horseback would be chasing them down, replaced as their horses get tired, and this hunt could take hours. It would go through the day. Eventually, as their prey, as their quarry gets too tired to go on, it would turn, it would come to bay, and it would turn, and that's the point when the nobility will be going in for the kill. They will be using spears from horseback, they will be using swords from horseback. And this is where you get this idea of the crossover between the hunt and warfare. So on horseback, the gentlemen would be drawing their swords and they would be going in for the kill. And there's something very, very visceral about plunging sword and steel into a living creature. It's something that is very, very hard to duplicate on the training grounds. So as much as these gentlemen would be training for war, stabbing straw bales or padded men in armour and striking them, there is no replacement for plunging a steel into a living beast. And they would be using this in part to train for warfare, to understand the force required to plunge a sword into a living animal, to understand the way that the movement of the body as it struck would be twisting and trying to pull the sword out of their arm, pulling them out of balance on the saddle. So as much about the hunt, it's also about the playing into warfare. So that's the hunt par force. Now there's another kind of hunt which is a little bit more genteel. So this kind of hunt, the gentlemen would be set in a line and their huntsmen would be basically herding the animal towards them. So they would create a large line, a screen of huntsmen and hounds, and they would be making a huge noise, they'd be beating the underbush, they'd be sending the dogs out, and this would draw the animals into a closer and closer area. Eventually the deer would burst into what is probably going to be a clearing, and then in the clearing the gentleman would be there with bow and arrow or with crossbow. And the real sort of the thing about this is holding your ground. So there was a thing in medieval hunting, especially with hunting deer, about the manliness, the machismo of hunting a large enough deer. And what was classed as a large enough deer was a deer with 10 tines. So a tine is the spike off of the antlers. So as the deer gets older and larger and bigger, the antlers get older and larger and more spiky. So if this antler set is large enough, it has 10 tines, 10 spikes. So it's only considered a good kill if the animal is big enough and if it's basically able to kill you. So you're to stand there with your cocked crossbow or ready to draw your bow and arrow as a deer, probably weighing about the same as a man, is going to be racing towards you, 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, running towards you with effectively 10 swords on its head. And you've got to try and stand there, and you've got maybe one shot to try and take this animal down, and it's a big thing. You're trying to hit under the throat, right in the centre of the chest, and get the animal's heart, and hopefully that will drop it and it comes skidding to a halt at your feet. If not, if you hit the flank, if you hit the rump, if you miss entirely, the beast is going to come on, it's going to charge into you, knock you out of the way, or plunge those 10 dagger points into your body. So that's the bravery element in this regard, is hunting the animal as it's racing towards you. So those are two different ways of hunting the stag, hunting the deer. Once you've actually got the animal killed, there's all sorts of ritual around it. So the first part of the kill, the intestines and the stomach will go to the dogs. And this trains the dogs so that they understand that when they do their job well, when they hunt the deer well, they get reward, they get fed, they get the sort of the really juicy morsels out of the deer. Obviously, the size of the antlers will be taken into account, and these will be given to the man who killed the deer. It's no sort of coincidence inside lots of country houses there are huge antlers on the walls. This is a mark of respect to show how brave the man was to stand up to it. The horn as well would be used to declare the kill. So these animals were held in great respect by the nobility. There's a few animals we'll go into that were held in great esteem. And to mark the honour of killing the animal, they would blow a signal to show the mort, the death of the animal. And this is a mark of respect that the animal has given you the competition, it has presented itself, you've succeeded in the kill, it has managed to sort of be killed, but sometimes they would even call it if it escaped. So they respected the animal in the hunt as well. So there's a huge amount of kind of show and role play around the hunt. It's not, as I say, just about the meat, it's not about the skin, it's about the whole social element involved. So that's the hunting of the deer, it's the grand hunt, the royal hunt. I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the others as we go along.